Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight, inshallah, we will continue our discussion on the lowercase letters. And in this session, we are going to practice writing the lowercase letters. We practiced writing the uppercase capital letters. And in this lesson, we're going to practice writing the lowercase letters. And when we make the lowercase letters, there are certain letters that will change and certain letters that will not. So there are some letters that we will not be writing tonight. We will not write the alif, the dal, and so on. We will only be practicing those letters that actually change and have a lowercase form. Now we see we have 5 letters here. We have ba, ta, tha, noon, and ya. And the noon and the ya, of course, are towards the end of the alphabet, but we have put them together in this group because when all 5 of these letters change into a lowercase form, their lowercase form looks very similar. If you notice, they all have this very small curve. You see, all of them look exactly the same. So when you write this, you're just making this very small curve. Let's try it again. Start from this point, come down a little bit, and then finish the flat bottom. So they all look the same in their lowercase form, and the only difference is the number of dots that they have and where the dots are positioned. So the ba has 1 dot underneath, the ta has 2 dots on top, the tha has 3 dots on top of it, the noon has 1 dot on top, and the ya has 2 dots underneath. So the way that we can tell the difference between these letters when they're in their lowercase form, even though they have the exact same basic shape, we can tell the difference because of the number of dots that they have. So now we're going to practice writing the letters themselves. We have the ba first. So we're going to come down just a little bit and then finish a flat bottom. And we have to put 1 dot on the ba. Now we're going to write the ta. It has the exact same shape, but it has 2 dots on top. Now we're going to write the tha. It has the same shape, but it has how many dots? 3 dots on top. Now we're going to write the noon. It has the same shape, but with 1 dot on top. And now the ya has the same shape, but it has 2 dots underneath. So here we have the ba, ta, tha, noon, and ya written in their lowercase forms. Now we're going to go to the next group. And this is the jim, ha, and kha. And as you notice, the way that we make the lowercase of these forms is that we drop this tail portion of the letter on each one, and we keep the top portions. Remember, we drop the tails and we keep the tops. So then we're left with the jim, the lowercase form, the ha in its lowercase form, and the kha in its lowercase form. And as you notice here, once again, that this is another group where all of the letters in this group have the same basic shape. The tops of all of these are written in the same way. That's the jim, that's the ha, and this is the kha. What's the difference? The jim has 1 dot underneath, the ha does not have any dots, and the kha has 1 dot on top. So now let's write it ourselves. We're going to first write the jim. As we practice while tracing it, we come to the right and then we finish the bottom. And the jim has 1 dot. Now we're going to write the ha in the same way, but the only difference is that the ha does not have any dots. And now we're going to write the kha with the same basic shape, and the kha has 1 dot on top. So now we have the jim, ha, and kha. And now we're going to go to the next group. The next is the sin and the sheen. And once again, we're going to drop this tail portion on the sin and drop the tail portion on the sheen. We're going to keep just the tops, and we have this lowercase of the sin and this lowercase of the sheen. And the way we're going to write is we'll start here and we'll do 1 curve, a second curve, and then a short extension to connect to the next letter. And the sheen is written in the same way. 1 curve, 2 curve, and then a small extension, except that the sheen has 3 dots on top. The Seen doesn't have any dots. The Sheen has 3 dots. So now let's practice writing it ourselves. So now we have the Seen first, just as we practice while tracing it. 1 curve, 2 curve, and then a small extension. And no dots on the Seen. Now for the Sheen. 1 curve, 2 curve, a small extension, and then on top of the 2 curves, we put the 3 dots of the Seen. So here we have the Seen and the Sheen. And now time to go to our next set. And this is Sad and Dad. We drop the tail on the Sad, drop the tail on the Dad, and we have the lowercase Sad and lowercase Dad. So now we're going to trace it. Where do we start from? We start from this center point right here for the Sad. We come up and to the right, and then go down and make this flat bottom curve, and then we give it an extension to connect to the next letter. Same thing with the Dad. Start in the center part, come all the way around up a little bit, and then we give it a small extension to connect to the next letter, and we add 1 dot for the Dad. So we have Sad and Dad, and now we're going to write it ourselves. So we have now the Sad here and the Dad, and just as we practiced when we were tracing it, starting from this point, we come up and to the right, then come down all the way around, back up a little bit, and then the small extension. And now for the Dad. Come up to the right, down, back around underneath, up a little bit, and then the small extension. And the Sad, as we see here, does not have any dots, but the Dad, we have to add 1 dot for it. So we have Sad and Dad. And our next set is the Ain. Now the Ain, if you remember from our last lesson, has 3 forms. It has this first form in the beginning of a word, the second form in the middle of a word, and this last form when it's at the end of a word. So let's now trace them. Now the beginning form. You're going to draw the head of the Ain and have just a small extension. That's it, just like that, no tail. Now, for the middle version of the Ain, when it's in the middle of a word, we start from the right side, come up, back to the right, going around, and stop at a small extension right there. Now, to do the lowercase of the Ain when it's at the end of a word, we do just like when it's in the middle of the word. We start at the right side, go to the left, come back all the way around, but instead of a small extension, when the Ain is at the end of a word, it actually has a tail. So this is the Ain, Ain, the 3 forms of the Ain, the beginning of a word, middle of a word, and end of a word. So now let's practice writing it ourselves. First, we're going to do the beginning of the word form. We're going to draw the head with a little extension, the top with a little extension. Now for the middle one, we start at the right, come up to the left, and then come back to the right and go all the way around and leave a small extension. And when we do the form at the end of a word, it's the same as the form in the middle of a word, but we actually add a tail for it. So all 3 of these are Ain. Ain in the beginning of a word, Ain in the middle, and Ain at the end of a word. Now the next letter we're going to do is the Ghain. And as you can see, the Ghain is written exactly like the Ain, but it has 1 dot on top. So you can trace it just like the Ain, but don't forget you have to put that dot on top of it. Otherwise, it's not a Ghain, it's just the Ain. So now we're going to practice writing it ourselves. After you trace it, then go and practice writing it yourself. Just like the Ain, we're going to draw the top and add a dot. Just like the Ain, we're going to do the middle form of the Ain and then put a dot to make it Ghain. And we're going to write the end form of the Ain and then add a dot to make it Ghain. So all 3 of these are the forms of the Ghain. Beginning of a word, middle of a word, end of a word. Now to our next set. And this is the Fa and the Qaf. They look kind of similar in their capital forms. The Fa has a flatter bottom like the Ba and the Ta and the Tha, but the Qaf has a round bottom form like the Nun. But when they're in their lowercase, they look exactly the same, except the difference is Fa has 1 dot on top and Qaf has 2 dots on top. And if you remember the way that we write the Fa, we start from this point right here. We make a little circle, come down and leave this extension underneath it. And we draw our dot. And the exact same thing with the qaf. Start here, a little circle, come down, and a flat bottom, and then a flat base, and then we put 2 dots on it. Now we're going to practice writing it ourselves. So first we're going to do the fa. Start at the right, circle clockwise, come down a little bit, and give it a flat foundation, and put 1 dot on top of it. And then the qaf done in the same way. A small circle, come down, and give it a flat base, and then it has 2 dots on top of it. So this is lowercase fa and lowercase qaf. And then our next set. And this is our last set. This is kaf, lam, and mim. So we're going to trace them just like we trace the capital letters. Now, the kaf, if you remember, instead of just dropping the tail, we also bend the top portion of it. Instead of drawing it just straight with a little extension, we're going to bend the top portion of it like this, and then give it that small extension. When we write the lam, very simple. Just come straight down and a small extension to the left. And when we write the mim, you can write it in a couple of ways. One is that you start from here and go counterclockwise like that with the small extension. You can, some people also write it in this way, where they go clockwise and then give a small extension that way. Both are okay. So now we're going to write it ourselves. First, we're going to start with the kaf. We're going to give it that bent top, and then we're going to give it a flat base. That's the kaf. Now for the lam, we're just going to come straight down with a little extension to the left, and that's the lowercase lam. And to draw the mim, like we said, there's 2 ways you can do it. You can go counterclockwise and then give a small extension, or you can go clockwise and then give a small extension like that. So these are the lowercase forms of the kaf, lam, and mim. And it's a very good idea that you practice writing these over and over. The more you write it, the easier it's going to become for you to be able to recognize the letters of the alphabet. So when we go to the next parts, those are going to be easier, and eventually reading is going to be very easy. So this is the end of our session.